The good times continue to roll for the Minnesota Twins, who logged another winning week and, in doing so, ascended near the top of the American League Central standings. To the extent this incredible ongoing run could have previously been attributed to low-grade competition, that's no longer the case, as the Twins took the fight this past week to a pair of playoff contenders with premier pitching and outclassed them both. Hello and welcome to the Week in Review from Twins Daily. I am Nick Nelson, author of the weekly column on Twins Daily, recapping the past week of action for the Twins. This is the podcast version. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the podcast, let us know. Feel free to reach out via Twitter or give us a rating on your favorite podcast platform. Also, feel free to stop by twinsdaily.com and swing by the article and share your thoughts in the comments on the past week of Twins baseball. Let's get into it, folks. We're going to look at the highlights, the lowlights, the trending storylines, and what's next for the Minnesota Twins. The weekly snapshot for the week of Monday, May 6th through Sunday, May 12th. Another great week for the Twins. Won both of their series against the Mariners and the Blue Jays. Went 5-2 to improve their record to 24-16 through 40 games. We are about a quarter of the way through the schedule, and the Minnesota Twins playing at a 97-win pace. Despite that 7-13 start, really impressive and amazing stuff. Their run differential in the past week, over these 7 games, they outscored their opponents by 14 runs to improve their overall run differential on the season to plus 27. And the Twins now second in the American League Central. They were tied momentarily with the Guardians until the Guardians were able to pull away and salvage one win in their series against the White Sox. So they stay ahead by a half game, but to say the tides seem to be turning in the AL Central would be an understatement at this time. Let's review the last week's game results one by one here. Just take a quick look back at these 7 games. Twins opened the week on Monday with a 3-1 victory over the Mariners. Very strong pitching in that game as the Twins were able to get out to a 1-0 start in the series. The next day, a little bit more of a tough game on Tuesday. Twins lost 10-6, the bullpen unraveling and blowing a late lead in that one. But they rebound behind Chris Paddock on Wednesday, win 6-3, got help from some home runs in that game, and then closed out the series with a truly impressive victory over the Mariners, 11-1, just dismantled Seattle to take another series. Then they headed to Toronto to face the Blue Jays, the team that they knocked out of the playoffs last year. Joe Ryan set the tone in that series opener with a gem on Friday night, a 3-2 victory for the Twins. Saturday, another tough game for the bullpen, lost 10-8, but were able to rebound on Sunday with a very crisp 5-1 victory to win their 6th straight series, improved to 17-3 in their past 20 games. To get started here, before we dive into the highlights, the lowlights, let's take a look at the news and notes from the past week. A very active week on the schedule with 7 games and, of course, a trip across the border to Canada. But I will say relatively little action on the roster churn front this past week, and that is a welcome change from the past few episodes of the show when we've been kind of running through a whole list of items. So nobody landed on the injured list over the past 7 days. The only significant roster move, aside from a few minor league signings and Josh Winder starting a rehab stint in the minors, was the swap of Jorge Alcala for Josh Stalmont in the bullpen. The treatment of Alcala, who threw 48 pitches on Tuesday before being optioned back to AAA again, remains perplexing to me. Even while understanding that he's a guy with options, so the back end carousel at the bullpen is going to apply for him, that minor league taxi. But he's looked good. He's got a good arm. I mean, this is a guy that the Twins thought highly of enough at one point to trade Ryan Presley for. And as we'll discuss, they could use some help in those middle relief innings, and that's seemingly where Alcala can plug in and be his best. So I'll be curious to see how that goes moving forward, but still just very mysterious to me. Also on the injury news front, we did receive an update via Dan Hayes of The Athletic on the status of Royce Lewis, who is, of course, still rehabbing from that quadriceps injury. Unfortunately, nothing overly positive there. Sounds like he's been able to engage in some baseball activities at partial, I think they said 85% intensity, But a recent MRI for Lewis showed that the quad strain that he suffered on opening day has not yet fully healed, still shows some signs of inflammation. Look, I'm not a doctor, and I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But my understanding, basically, of the essentials of this injury are, it was a severe quad strain, and of course, on the severe end of a strain, and the next step after that is a tear, which can often require surgery. Obviously, it did not get to that point for Lewis, which is good, but he did get that platelet-rich plasma PRP injection, which is something that we often see used to treat players with partial tears or super severe strains. In fact, an example that comes to mind, I believe, Anthony DiSclafani received a PRP injection in his elbow last season to try to resolve what was going on there. Obviously, in that case, didn't really work out. Not trying to cast anything out of this situation, but basically just to make the point, this is a long-term injury. I mean, this was a very serious injury for Lewis, and I think the idea of him being back in anything less than 2 months was probably never very realistic. So what we're hearing here, and I think Derek Falvey more or less, alluded to this in his quotes, is nothing unexpected. This is kind of playing out as anticipated. It's just going to take some time, and I think Lewis knows that, which is why in another article that Dan Hayes wrote recently, I know he called this the most challenging rehab of his career, and we're talking about a career that has basically been defined by challenging rehabs. So it sounds like the Twins are pleased with his recovery. I don't think there's been any setbacks or anything like that. It's just going to take a while, and really the Twins have every reason to take it slow and ensure that Royce Lewis's quad is in a very good place before they start fully ramping him up. Because, I mean, look, they're playing at almost 100-win pace in his absence. Obviously, the idea of bringing him back into this fold, very exciting. Speaking of exciting things, let's dive into some of the highlights from the past week of Twins baseball, a 5-2 week with a lot of great offensive output. The turnaround of the Twins offense has been amazing to behold. The lineup did not just go from bad to good. It essentially went from worst to best, and in the blink of an eye. I mean, it just happened on a dime. Through their first 20 games, the Twins had the league's worst offense per runs created plus adjusted stat from Fangraphs, aside from the White Sox and Marlins, who are the dregs. I mean, truly the dregs. And since then, only the Dodgers have been better than the Twins over these past 20 games, who are the best, the greatest. I mean, just a star-studded, amazing team. So that kind of says it all. The past week, the Twins pushed 42 runs across in their 7 games, averaging 6 runs a game, slugged 10 more homers, 17 doubles, and as I mentioned, won 5 of 7 games to rise 8 above the 500 mark. This offensive charge we're seeing from the Twins continues to be led by red-hot Max Kepler and Ryan Jeffers, who've been among the best hitters in the league the past few weeks. Kepler ran his hitting streak up to 14 games on Sunday. He went 10 for 25 on the week with a homer and 6 doubles. Since his return from the injured list on April 22nd, Max Kepler leads the major leagues in wins above replacement and win probability added. There's been no one better, plain and simple. Jeffers himself is leading the entire American League overall with a 988 OPS after homering 3 more times in the past week, driving in 7 runs across his 5 games. There really aren't enough superlatives to describe what we're seeing from Ryan Jeffers here. I mean, it's just an amazing display of power hitting prowess to build off the breakthrough last year. And one thing that I think really bears noting is that Jeffers' strikeout rate is below 20%. That is way down from his career 29% mark. This is a guy that is just locked in beyond belief. He's on an MVP type pace right now. And I think you could almost make the same case for Kepler, although of course he had that slow start and the injured list stint. As great as Kepler and Jeffers have been, it is the steady contributions up and down the lineup that are really making the Twins' offense almost impossibly formidable for opponents to try to face. Carlos Correa looks to be back fully in his groove from early in the season. He went 7 for 23 with 4 doubles, struck out just twice in 25 plate appearances. Willie Castro kept on cooking. 6 hits last week, including a double, a triple, and a homer. So Castro hitting for the cycle in the week. And Carlos Santana You got to give it to the guy. His individual resurgence has been probably more remarkable than anyone's, as bad as he looked early in the season. Homered in 3 straight games in Toronto, including a crucial 3-run bomb that basically decided Sunday's contest, put the Twins in front for good. This offense just has a spark and a drive that were completely amiss during that 7-13 run to open the season. It's astounding to see. They start games strong. They attack early. They avoid long dry spells, and they step up in key spots. And those are all things that you would have said the opposite early on, which is just this is baseball at its most extreme. I feel like the way these things have swung, but hopefully this is a sign of who the Twins truly are. Thursday's game might have been the most impressive victory of the season thus far for the Twins, in my opinion. And I think it reflected the transformation that we've seen perfectly. They're heading into a getaway day game on Thursday afternoon. Their bullpen is depleted. They're going up against Major League's ERA leader in Logan Gilbert for the Mariners. Obviously, the kind of spot where your expectations are probably very much in check. Twins lineup ambushed Gilbert in the first inning for 5 runs, batted around, kept adding throughout the game on the way to an 11-1 series-clinching blowout win. But of course, what shouldn't be overlooked in this example is that Pablo Lopez and the Twins pitching held Seattle to 1 run in that game. So as nice as all that extra run support was, it wasn't even really ultimately even needed. And this, I think, points to the underlying thread in all of this winning from the Twins, which is that their starting pitching has reemerged as an overwhelming competitive strength. Pablo Lopez was dominant against the M's on Thursday, held them to 1 run and 6 1/3 with 10 strikeouts and no walks. Ace-like stuff once again from Pablo Lopez. Previous night, Chris Paddock with 10 strikeouts over 5 1/3, allowed 1 run. Joe Ryan on Friday went 7 innings, lowered his ERA to 3.21, pushed his K-to-walk ratio to 53-6 on the season. Bailey Ober pitched twice, allowed 2 runs over 10 1/3 innings. He also had a 10 strikeout game on Sunday, was just brilliant. And Simeon Woods Richardson had 1 very good start, 1 not very good start, but you look at the overall body of work there since he was called up, a 3.24 ERA through 25 innings, and what more could you ask for from the number 5 spot in your rotation? Collectively, over the past week, Minnesota Twins starting pitchers allowed 10 earned runs over 40 1/3 innings. That is a 2.23 ERA with a 54-5 strikeout to walk ratio in those 40 innings. Just absurd. Moving on to the lowlights, it could have been an even better week for the Twins. They very easily could have gone 7-0 and pushed to 19-1 in their last 20 games, as crazy as that is, because they did have multi-run leads in both of their losses on Tuesday and Saturday before watching the soft underbelly of their bullpen get sliced open on both occasions. On Tuesday, it was Jay Jackson, Steven Okert, and Jorge Alcala combining to allow 8 earned runs in the final 3 innings, turning a 4-2 lead into a 10-6 loss. Jay Jackson and Steven Okert also involved in Saturday's bullpen meltdown, which saw the Twins with an 8-3 advantage going into the 5th before giving up 7 unanswered runs and losing 10-8. Cole Sands gave up 3 runs in that one. Caleb Thielbar looked really rough, gave up a couple walks and a hit, recorded only 1 out. You know, to some extent, a few lapses are to be expected from the bullpen, especially with the team being on such a heater as they are right now. Because, I mean, you have to look at this. Outside of that blowout loss against Boston on May 5th, the Twins have had leads to protect in literally every game over the past 3 weeks. The other 2 games they've lost, they had multi-run leads that they had to protect, and every other game has been a win. So, you know, there's been a couple lopsided wins mixed into that, but the relief corps has been pressed into high leverage situations almost nonstop in the past 20 games with not many off days mixed in. That takes a toll, you know? I mean, realistically, that takes a toll, and it limits Rocco Baldelli's ability to use his preferred relievers at all the times he'd like to, including Tuesday and Saturday when both Yohan Duran and Griffin Jacks were unavailable because of how much they'd been pitching. The problem is that right now it feels like no one other than those 2 can really be trusted in important spots at all. And even Jax looked a little rocky in his 3 appearances this last week. So, you know, being without Brock Stewart, obviously he was Minnesota's most effective reliever before going down with that shoulder injury. That hinders the depth of the bullpen at the back end. That takes away a key option. But the Twins are going to need more on balance going forward from the breadth of this bullpen, mainly because, from a big picture perspective, they cannot afford to keep riding Duran and Jax as hard as they have been forced to during this stretch. Keeping those guys healthy into the end of the season and into the playoffs is paramount. We saw in those postseason series how crucial they are last year. So I think, I see a week like this where Griffin Jax had 3 different appearances where he threw more than 25 pitches. I don't like to see that. I was glad that Jax was kept on the shelf and that the Twins were able to keep him on the shelf on Sunday by extending that lead a little bit. Looking at the bullpen as a whole, it's reasonable to expect the likes of Steven Okert and Cody Funderburk to rebound. They've been having some rough patches. But I look at, Jay Jackson and Caleb Thielbar, who are 36 and 37 years old, respectively. And I can't help but wondering if they're showing their age. And that's maybe a little less reversible, which is concerning. In particular, I think patience from the coaching staff has got to be wearing very thin with Jackson, who has shown no ability to get anybody out with a diminished arsenal that, let's be honest, was not very strong to begin with. This is a guy who is in his late 30s and had never gotten a major league contract before this season. He was charged with 5 earned runs on 4 hits and a walk while recording only 1 out in each of his 2 appearances last week, ballooning his ERA to 6.87. Jackson opened the season with 4 scoreless innings. Since then, he has given up at least 1 run in 9 of 11 appearances. This is not a guy you can trust at all. I know the Twins have an option on him next year. I know they like him. Seems like a good guy. And you never want to be hasty in making decisions with your bullpen depth, but he's got no options. There's not really much choice. I just don't know where you go from here. We'll see. The trending storyline for the week, I'm looking at Byron Buxton. He is, I believe, eligible to come off the 10-day injured list on Monday as the Twins kick off their series, Tuesday, I guess, is when they'll be kicking off that series against the Yankees. He got some scans on his right knee, which, as I mentioned, flared up, and those came back negative. And there's been some suggestion from the team that this IL stint could end up being pretty close to the minimum. They don't seem to view this as anything very serious. It's obviously something that is going to loom over him going forward, knowing what we know. But I think the hope is that this incident was more of a sort of minor bump in the road as opposed to like a sign of things to come. And we'll see. First, we'll see how the Twins choose to handle Buxton with his availability. As with Royce Lewis, there's no need whatsoever to rush here since the team is playing phenomenally well without Buxton as we surpass the quarter mark of the campaign. The front office could choose to send Buxton on a rehab assignment. I think you could make the case for it with how rusty he's looked at the plate. But my feeling by now is why waste any of his game reps anywhere other than the big league field? If Byron Buxton is going to be dashing around on the bases and chasing balls in the outfield, I would just as soon have him doing that for the Twins, where that impact can be felt in a meaningful way. And I think that impact is bigger than a lot of people might perceive. Obviously, Buxton was not hitting well. He was struggling with his plate approach, 32 strikeouts to 3 walks. That's ugly. He was struggling at the plate and fighting it. But Buxton has been a big contributor via his fielding and his base running. And that's what was so encouraging to see, knowing the health situation, was that he was moving around so well and making plays. The Twins rank 4th out of 30 major league teams in wins above replacement from the center field position, according to Fangraphs. And that's primarily because of Buxton and his defensive excellence. Buxton, according to Fangraphs' defensive rating metric, that values defensive contributions, that pegs Buxton as the 3rd most valuable defensive center fielder so far in the major leagues, behind only Julio Rodriguez and our old friend, Michael A. Taylor. So I think if Buxton's feeling okay, the Twins might as well activate him, maybe with a plan to reduce his usage compared to early in the season. He appeared in 28 of the team's first 30 games. Don't know that they need to be pushing him that hard. But therein lies the tricky part, because, you'd love to keep rotating Austin Martin through center field as a way to give Buxton more of a break. But someone's got to go from the roster to make room for Buxton. And seemingly that's either going to need to be Martin or Jose Miranda. And Jose Miranda, all of a sudden, sort of thriving as Minnesota's regular starting third baseman. He started 8 of their last 10 games at the hot corner after looking at one point like he was kind of out of the picture at that position, which is another great thing to see. I think the fact that Willie Castro can play both of these positions, center field and third base, gives the Twins the luxury of basically choosing based on their preference. Would they rather have Miranda or Martin on the roster right now? Because they can play it either way. You send down Miranda, you're going to have Castro play more third. you send down Martin, you're probably going to have him playing more center. And Castro, as I mentioned, playing extremely well. He ranks fourth among all major league players in wins above replacement since April 22nd. Two of the three players ahead of him, of course, being Kepler and Jeffers. Twins are dominating the league right now. It's awesome. Let's take a look ahead as we close it out here and look to another week, another big consequential week looming for the Minnesota Twins. They'll get a day off on Monday before welcoming the dreaded New York Yankees to town for a midweek series at Target Field. From there, it's off to Cleveland for 3 games against the Guardians. These specific opponents, of course, carry a special weight for the Twins. The Yankees are their eternal tormentors, who we all despise. And this Guardians team looks like their top competitor in the Central, as I mentioned, leading by a half game right now. New York and Cleveland also have just been 2 of the best teams in the league. They rank 2nd and 3rd in the AL in wins. So high-quality competition and another great test for the Twins. If they can put together another strong week here, I think that would not only solidify the Twins' legitimacy as contenders, if they're not already there yet, I think they pretty much are, but it would help build their case, which is suddenly pretty valuable as the team to beat in the American League. No one's playing better right now. So for that Yankees series on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, it'll be Chris Paddock, Pablo Lopez, and Joe Ryan going for the Twins against Carlos Rodon, Marcus Stroman, and Clark Schmidt for the Yankees. And then in the Guardians series, it'll be Mitchell Parker, Logan Allen, and Tanner Bibby going for the Guardians. And, of course, it'll be Paddock and Ober and maybe Simeon Woods Richardson. I assume so. I don't think one rough start's going to be enough to knock him out, although it does bear noting that David Festa is pitching really, really well. One of the Twins' top pitching prospects in AAA, so that'll be worth keeping an eye on. As, of course, will the progress of Louis Varland, who had some good outings when he got to AAA. I think gave up 7 earned runs in his most recent one, but I do think that the Twins want to let Varland keep working things out in AAA for a little bit. So thank you very much for joining for this edition of the Week in Review. With the off day on Monday, I highly recommend going to check out the Twins Off Daily podcast run by our writers. That's on its own podcast channel, but if you search for Twins Off Daily podcast on your favorite podcast provider, you'll be able to find it. They take sort of a fun spin on things, play some fun games in that show, and it's really enjoyable to listen to. I myself will be back next Sunday to break down another week of Twins baseball. Thank you very much again. Make sure to stop by the site and share your thoughts in the comments. And we'll see you next week. Go Twins.